Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming to Future Possible Parenting Identity and Relationship Goals as they intersect with gender affirmation processes. The primary scope of this study is to examine how young people's considerations about future parenting intersect with the gender affirmation process. Our processes applied known developmental and family theories to empirical data in order to create a framework for developmental processes around parenting identity and gender affirmation. We know a lot about gender affirming care, and there have been increasing studies about fertility preservation. The best practices state that fertility counseling as well as fertility preservation are important resources for those who are navigating transition with a desire to become parents. Research has identified the elements that clinicians believe to add to the most effective fertility counseling for young people. One is included a multidisciplinary team approach. Second, having shared decision-making between adolescents, their parents, and the clinicians. 3, specific efforts to facilitate patient engagement. 4, flexible personalized care. And 5, having a reflexive process for the clinician. Choices about parenthood have been examined, and trans people create family in a variety of ways, and there are certain issues that are faced in the decision-making process, like the cost or the timing or decisions about gender affirmation process. Youth can experience decisional conflict if they're weighing the future of parenting identity against their current tasks or constraints. So they may be considering, well, will I move forward with my parenting identity plan, or how does that affect my gender affirmation plan? And there's some decisional conflict if those things are seen as at odds with each other. Despite wanting to be parents in the future, most trans young people do not pursue fertility preservation. So that's our current state of the field right now, is that it's not terribly typical. Family factors might shape how trans youth think about and talk about their future parenting roles. So if parents are accepting or supporting, that can be helpful. Trans women have reported a desire to give birth to a child as a way to affirm their gender identity and their identity as a woman. Some trans men who become pregnant also report higher levels of dysphoria while they're pregnant, and then some challenges due to the lack of support from community. This is not true universally, and some people do not report enhanced dysphoria during these processes. So our research questions were, how do young people's parental or non-parental identity intersect with their gender affirmation process? And second, how do social interactions like family members and romantic partners and cisnormative ideologies contribute to future parenting or non-parenting identity? This sample is pulled from a larger sample of, include 27 transgender identified youth ages and young adults ages 15 to 29. They were 33% trans women, 15% trans men, and 52% were another gender, a third gender, either non-binary or genderqueer. And the larger sample included 90 people data were collected at LGBT youth community centers in 8 metro areas in the US, in Canada, and Ireland. We completed 1 to 2 hour semi-structured interviews, and this paper represents an axial level coding done using in vivo, which is the second realm of coding in theory creation, where you've coded major themes and then you work to create theory. So the first thing that we did was do some content analysis, coding the 6 major themes. The first theme is exploration, which is thinking about gathering information, considering options. Commitment is how committed someone is to whether or not they want to have kids. Cisnormative expectations were throughout many interviews about how people considered what it would mean to be a parent in light of societal expectations about men and women and how people parent and what roles they take. Family expectations, what people's parents thought about them having kids or other family members. And finally, relationship considerations, if someone felt they would be in a relationship where they might like to co-parent. So exploration, here's a good example. I'm interested in co-parenting, but I don't have any interest in bearing children out of my body. I've thought about it for a fair amount of time. That's the exploration. None of these decisions are casual. I've had a lot of cis female partners and a couple of whom were really interested in having kids. For a long time, I was anti-population growth, and I felt strongly that nobody should bring more white babies into the world, yet I don't have a strong desire to have an identity as a parent. But I feel very strongly about wanting to be a mentor and be in the lives of kids being around. So that's an example of a large amount of exploration. Commitment here's a very strong commitment. Do you want to have kids someday? No, not a chance. How much do you think about it? I didn't think about it at all. Oh, okay. So you said earlier you want to have a hysterectomy. So this is such a no that the process of thinking, do I want to have kids? It's not part of the transition decision-making. No, not at all. So it's a very strong level of commitments. Another form of commitment might include, I've thought a lot about this and I'm very certain that I want to have kids, or I've thought a lot about this and I'm very certain that I don't want to have kids. Cisnormative expectations included, here's a good example. There was a bit of a delay with my gender affirmation process because I wanted to preserve the ability to have biological children. And that's important because I came from a big family and it was nice that my parents really tried and gave us a good upbringing. So I wanted to give that to somebody else. Family expectations, what parents want from you, literally what my father told me, I don't care what you do, I don't care about you, I just want grandkids. And this person is reflecting on that, saying that would be really irresponsible because, you know, my parents weren't ready, and but yet the one thing that they want is grandkids. Finally, relationship considerations. It doesn't matter if I'm getting someone pregnant, my husband's getting someone pregnant, or we're adopting. I'm happy either way as long as we have kids. That it's a family element. A number of other people said things like, well, I will only want to have kids if I'm in a relationship with somebody who wants to co-parent. So we went back to our major content analysis themes, and then we pulled on theories that were represented in those themes. So first, queer and trans theories, where the lens where cisnormative expectations can be observed as experienced by the participants, and also experiences of minority stress for violating those normative expectations. So that those were themes that came up, and we interpret them with the queer and trans theory lens. Erickson's stages of development, the exploration and commitment pieces that's a theory about how youth development, that you explore, think through options, and then you commit, and that is true in a variety of forms of identity. Symbolic interactionism, this provides a framework for the intersecting themes of meaning making, relationship expectations, and family expectations. So we've set about building our model. The first, from an Ericksonian perspective, there's exploration and commitment. And what we found in this sample was that it was not really a linear process, that exploration and commitment were back and forth to each other over time. And something, you know, one level of exploration didn't necessarily predict a level of commitment. There were certain distinct driving mechanisms that came up in the sample that may not be true in other forms of identity development or with other populations. So cisnormativity, transnormativity, and minority stress, people would explore because they certainly wanted to, they may be concerned about what does it mean to be a mother or a father, or what are gender roles say about raising kids. Transnormativity, there was some pushback against ideals that I might transition from one gender to another, and that that could influence my parenting, or even that having a child would reinforce a more binary model of gender. Finally, a minority stress, both enacted stigma and felt stigma, were contributors to people choosing to explore their thinking about parenting, as well as having a commitment to their thinking about parenting. So then once there'd been this exploration commitment process, we saw a lot of evidence of reconsideration. And what were the kind of driving mechanisms of reconsideration? And so those had more to do with the position in the family. So whether or not, what your age was, whether or not your family expected you to have kids, the expectations of a relationship that you might be in, and then finally the opportunity. So if you think this is possible, is it expensive? How would adoption work? And so what the pragmatics of the opportunity are. Finally, what this yielded was meaning making in a parental role for people. So this was a developmental process of creating a sense of what does it mean to be a parent for me. And what is incorporated in that is what does it mean to me based on what parenting in society says. So there's gendered parental roles. My society has expectations of how I will father or mother or parent. Some people talked about parenting as an element of just being an adult, that's something that grown-ups do. And then finally, issues of population concerns in parenting and why someone might choose to preserve fertility versus adopt or foster kids. So parenting was also then related to specifically to the gender affirmation process. So how did a family expect you to time gender affirmation, or what were their feelings about your role as a parent related to that? Body considerations, how would gender affect your, how would it affect your body to be carrying a kid around, to birth a kid, to be breastfeeding? And the timing of how gender affirmation might intersect with parenting. And this is a sample for whom that was relevant, because they were, most of them, of a time and age when they did not have access to puberty suppression. Minority stress, so the experiences that they might have of stigma based on their efforts to parent. And then finally, cisnormativity, the taking on of family-based gender roles and the expectation of people partner and have kids, and then transnormativity around what would it mean to be a non-binary in a parenting role. So our conclusions were, first of all, that parental identity processes map onto existing developmental theories. So that a parenting identity is one form of identity that's similar to religious identity and vocational identity, and that this is something that our existing developmental theories can inform us about. There was a lot of diversity among the experiences in terms of how people navigated this process and this identity development. There was a dominant theme of young people navigating their gender affirmation concurrently with their parental identities. And this has a lot to do with the specific sample of late adolescents and young adults who we were interviewing. And finally, cisnormativity and minority stress were constant contributing forces to all layers of exploration, commitment, and meaning making. The implications of the realm of parenting is dominated with cis and heteronormativity. And so what that could mean for us is reducing cis and heteronormativity in people's thinking about parenting could help to open options and make people feel more comfortable. Interest in parenting can take many forms. So people had a lot of different ways of thinking about parenting. Gender and parenting might intertwine as social constructs for some, so that either I'm a parent or I'm a mother or I'm a father, or my affirmation process will shift based on my thinking about my parenting. And finally, interest was in being a parent or parenting in some form was quite common in the sample, that there were far more people who wanted to be parents than who did not want to be parents. The limitations, the lack of the identity development processes in participants' narratives cannot be taken for a lack of exploration, because we didn't specifically ask all of those processes. We applied the themes that develop naturally to existing developmental theories. Data is from a time of more limited gender-affirming healthcare options, and so the young people in the sample didn't have as many choices for preservation as they might have today. And they also had not likely had puberty suppression. And finally, this is data from a larger study that was not focused on fertility. It was more focused on family relationships. And so this is a subset of that study. Here's references, and thank you very much for your time. Please don't hesitate to email or ask questions.